All right, let's move on to quarterbacks. Before we get to actually running off the names, I want to ask you a question. What is your general philosophy when it comes to drafting quarterbacks? Because I know a lot of people, they like to reach, especially for the top tier guys, even in the first round. Whereas there's other guys that are in the position to, hey, no, I'm going to stay patient, get a guy in later rounds, probably 8, 9, 10, somewhere back there. So in general, what is your strategy when it comes to drafting quarterbacks?
So when it comes to quarterbacks, the only time I think it was smart to draft a quarterback like real early, like maybe first round, maybe second round, would have been Lamar Jackson's MVP season, because he was winning every week for people and he won championships for a lot of people. But when you look at fantasy as a whole, generally it's not, your team's not going to come down to the quarterback winning you your season. A lot of the quarterbacks end up right around the same points. I wish I could remember the numbers, the exact numbers that it was, but it was something like, when you talk about number 6 through number 23, by average points per game, fantasy wise, there's a difference of, I think from top to bottom, there's only a difference of like 2.5 points. Like a lot of the quarterbacks by the end of the year are right in the same range. So for me, I'm somebody who would rather wait and get a quarterback that, puts up decent numbers. He might not be a 25 to 30 point a game kind of guy, but if you can get a solid, 17, 18 points out of a guy for your quarterback position, then I would rather wait to draft a quarterback and get that guy and get some more high value guys, some guys that are going to put up, points because they're catching balls. So, obviously running backs and wide receivers, the occasional tight end, slipping into the earlier rounds. But I think the earliest that I like to draft a quarterback would be like the 5th round, after I have a couple of really good skill position guys.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I would throw on that, if for everybody out there, check your league settings and then go in and check your projected fantasy points on the season. And that'll kind of give you a good idea of just how much value you can get as your quarterback. Because there are some leagues where the quarterbacks don't really get you anything. There are other leagues where the quarterbacks will get you a lot. So if you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, who is going to get you a ridiculous amount of fantasy points, like top 3, 5 overall in your entire league on the season, it might be wise to kind of aim to get them in an earlier round compared to waiting, because those guys are on such a different tier than your mid-level quarterbacks would be. In that case, it would be worth it to do that. So go in, check your league settings, see how the points are applied to each player or position, check your projections on the season, and then kind of make a determination as to where you think you might aim to get these guys, and then play it by ear as you progress through the draft, where your needs are, and where you can get tremendous value for the pick in that round. That would be the only thing I would have to say to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive in here real quick. I'm really not going to talk about where we're going to draft these guys unless you want to, because of what we just discussed. But who's your number one quarterback on the board, Hefe?
So, this might come to a surprise to some people, but if you go and listen to our division debates, AFC East edition, you will hear that I think Josh Allen is going to be this year's MVP. I think with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders coming in, I think that's a big deal for this offense. Josh Allen really took the next step last year, and I think he's going to continue that. I think we're going to see him shine. He has, again, Stephon Diggs is a stud. To have as your number one. I think everything, Billy Bean out there in Buffalo as their GM, he's really done a good job building this team around Josh Allen, giving him the pieces he needs to be successful. And I think everything is in place for Josh Allen to have a huge year. He's just mobile enough to get a couple rushing touchdowns, some rushing yards through the year. to add some fantasy value. But we saw last year he was slinging that thing, and he was doing a really good job doing it. So I think that's going to continue. Again, I think he has an MVP season and comes out as the number one quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. 2020 quarterback number one. He's poised to continue his dominance, and they have a very favorable schedule. They have the 10th easiest strength of schedule versus passing defenses this year. I like him again as your quarterback, number one overall. He's trending about round three, 28th pick overall. Like we said earlier, it just depends on your league setup, whether you're going to reach for him in an earlier round or not. But I definitely think if Josh Allen is there when it comes time for you to draft a quarterback, he's your guy, even over guys like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and all that. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, he's your number two, correct?
He is my number two, and it's because I think his supporting cast got better. Right, you bring in a guy like Sammy Watkins, who is from what I've read and what I've heard, Sammy Watkins looks really good in camp. So I think that's going to help. Obviously, they draft Rashad Bateman. So as long as he can, get back in and stay healthy, that'll be good for him because Hollywood Brown has shown that he can be effective, but he also showed that he is not number one wide receiver material. So the fact that they can lean on other guys, even though this is a run heavy offense, to be able to lean on different guys and not put that kind of pressure on Hollywood Brown, and which falls back you putting pressure on the quarterback more because he doesn't have a good supporting cast. So because they did a good job of bringing in guys around him, I think that'll make them better in the passing game. But with Lamar Jackson, there's also the element of running the ball. And if this team is more dangerous in the passing game, then that's going to make Lamar more dangerous in the run game because you're going to see the linebackers fall back maybe a couple extra yards. You're going to see the safeties have to drop back and cover more over the top instead of not worrying about it, which will give Lamar Jackson more room to work his magic because he is a once in a lifetime kind of guy and has the ability to do special things. So he's got to be my number two.
Yeah, he's looking to bounce back after a production drop off last season. This year, the Ravens have the third easiest strength of schedule versus past defenses. So I expect him to have a hell of a year. Can't really add on to what much more than what you said. You pretty much hit the nail on the head there. He's trending in the fourth round, about 46th pick overall. Again, depends on where you need a quarterback. That's just where everybody seems to be taking him right now. So just for your information, he's trending in the fourth, about the 46th overall pick. Yeah, he'll have a hell of a year. He's my number four quarterback on the board. So a little bit of a difference there.
Him going in the fourth round this year is kind of crazy because after his MVP season, last year there were people
Hmm.
taking him in the first round. A lot of people taking him in the first round. So that's a big drop off from last season.
Yeah, definitely. But the ceiling's there. So if you can get him in a later round, that's a hell of a pickup.
Yeah, for sure. If he was still there in the fourth round, I would at least think about it for sure.
Yeah. All right. Number three on your board.
Number three is going to be Dak Prescott. And because I think the Cowboys defense still going to be absolute garbage. So Dak Prescott, even though they don't want to test that shoulder, I think they're going to have to, and I think he's going to throw for a lot of yards again. He showed he could do it, right? He was doing it consistently, because they needed him to, even though they were losing games in fantasy football. Some leagues, I guess, wins and losses matter. But most leagues, you don't have to worry about the wins and losses. As long as Dak Prescott is putting up, 400 yards and 4 touchdowns a game, he's somebody that I really like. I've liked Dak since he came in the league. I think he could be really good. He has a supporting cast around him. So I think he's got to be a top three quarterback.
Yeah, I have him as my seventh best quarterback. The questions are still swirling about his health after shattering his leg last season. Before the injury, though, he led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game. Although his ceiling is extremely high, I'm just not sure he's the best option in terms of value, especially in the fourth where he's been trending. But if he slides down and escapes into the later rounds, definitely consider him based off his ceiling alone.
Yep, absolutely agree.
All right, so number four for you is Russell Wilson.
Number four, Russell Wilson. For pretty much a lot of what I just said about Dak, I don't think the Seahawks defense is going to be very good. I think they're going to have to pass a lot. Russ going to have to cook. And Russ still, he's coming into his ninth year, I believe, and he's still able to be mobile. So hopefully, we can see that continue this year, and I think Russ, he's going to have another big year. We saw him kind of fall off, kind of in the middle of the season. He had some rough games last year. Hopefully, we can get that fixed, and they can have a good year. Again, I have DK being my number 2 receiver. So in order for that to happen, Russ is going to have to be really good. I think that happens this year. And again, Russ is my number 4.
Yeah, I like Russell Wilson. But like I said, like I alluded to earlier when we were talking about Metcalf, the Seahawks have probably the toughest schedule against rushing and passing defenses in the league. So it's going to be pretty tough. So with that, I have him slipping down as my 6th best quarterback. I think he's still going to get the points. I just don't think that ceiling is as high as it has been in the past. Plus, they have a very shaky offensive line. So I'm very wary about taking Russ unless he falls down the draft board and his value to draft pick position begins to really increase. He's trending in the 5th round, 52nd overall. So what you do from there is up to you. Pretty much all I got to say on Russ.
Yeah, somebody who's more than fine with drafting quarterback in the 5th round. I wouldn't mind taking Russ right there.
Absolutely. All right. So you're number 5. Ooh, can't believe you got him at number 5.
I know. I thought about putting I thought about putting Patrick Mahomes up at number 3, but I think for the reasons I stated before, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson are going to have to pass a lot. I think there are going to be some games where this Chiefs defense keeps things in check, and they're not going to have to rely on Patrick Mahomes to be Superman for him. So I think that hurt his value a little bit, but he's still Patrick Mahomes. He's still going to be slinging that thing. He still has Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, McCall Hardman filling in for where Sammy Watkins, the role that Sammy Watkins had. So, this offense is still going to be potent, led by a very good quarterback. Patrick Mahomes should have a very good year. And again, a lot of these quarterbacks end up in a very similar range of points. So it's not like I think Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott will be, way above Patrick Mahomes. But I have Patrick Mahomes again, my top 5 guy. He had to be top 5 because he's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I actually have him as my 2nd overall quarterback behind Josh Allen. He's trending in the 2nd round. He's actually the top quarterback coming off the board currently. So he's going in the 2nd round, generally about pick 17. In terms of value to pick ratio, taking Mahomes in the 2nd may be a little bit of a stretch. I would consider him in the 3rd, but that's depending on your quarterback value based off your league settings. But like I said, he's a first quarterback typically coming off. I think there's better value, especially with Josh Allen, if you can get Allen in a later round. But number 2 on my board, I think he's still going to be Superman for the Chiefs, and the dude's an absolute magician. So he should have another stellar year this year.
Yeah, hopefully we can see that offensive line stay healthy, that new rebuilt line.
Yeah, true that. True that. Offensive line's everything in the NFL, man.
Yeah, no kidding. Can't do anything without it, really.
Nah. All right, number 6. Ooh, big name there. I like it. I got him a little lower, which I'll get to, but number 6 for you is?
It felt so good to put Matthew Stafford on the board at number 6. Let me tell you, he's finally out of Detroit. He has an amazing supporting cast. I'm a big fan of Cooper Kupp. Everybody knows I like Cooper. Robert Woods, very, very good. The offensive line there is strong. It's just he finally has the chance to be the star we all know he can be. And I think it'll happen. He doesn't have the rushing ability that the quarterbacks before him have, which is why I had to put him underneath them. But I think that Sean McVay very, very excited to have a guy like Matthew Stafford in his offense, and I think he's going to let him sling the ball, especially with Cam Akers going down. Even though Sean McVay is fine with using a stable of running backs, I think Cam Akers going down kind of changes a little bit of the strategy and philosophy coming into this season. So I think Matthew Stafford is about to have a huge year and could have put him higher because I think his numbers this year are going to be ridiculous. But I have him as my number 6.
Yeah, so I have him at number 10, and I kind of regret putting him there because I definitely think he could be a top 3 quarterback this year. He is one of the most prolific passers in the league, and he has a new team, new energy, new weapons, and I really think he's going to have a monster year and just show how capable he truly is. He's trending, and get this, his trending pick is way back in the 10th round at 109th overall. And out of the top 18 quarterbacks available, only one, Lamar Jackson, has an easier strength of schedule against passing defenses compared to Matt Stafford. So he is going to have a monster year. And like I said, I think he is capable of being a top 3 quarterback this year, fantasy-wise. But because he is trending way back in the 10th, I kind of dropped him down to my 10th overall because I think you can get him at a later round if you're patient enough, which is a huge W if you can do that. If you can get Matt Stafford in as your quarterback in the 10th round, that is a massive W, hands down.
That's how I feel. Yeah, there's no way I would if I'm drafting and I see Matt. If I start to get kind of toward the 7th, 8th, 9th round, there's no way I'm letting Matthew Stafford just stay there and be somebody's second quarterback. Like, there's no way I'm letting that happen.
But I mean, average wise, he's going in the 10th round right now. That is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, insane. People are underestimating what Matthew Stafford can do.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm telling you, he's going to have a hell of a year this year. It's going to be exciting to watch. I'm excited because I like Matt Stafford, and I was even listening to Aaron Rodgers. I forget what it was on, but he was talking about just how good Matt Stafford is. That's
Yeah,
coming from Aaron
exactly.
Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. When you have Aaron Rodgers talking you up to everybody, I mean, Aaron Rodgers knows what he's talking about quarterback play. So I imagine Matthew Stafford is going to have an amazing season.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he's your number 7.
He is my number 7. And look, he doesn't. This is a guy who doesn't turn the ball over. He has Devonta Adams. Kind of like Matthew Stafford. The only reason he's not higher for me is because he doesn't have that rushing ability. He doesn't take off like he used to in his younger days. So I don't think we'll see him getting very many rushing yards or very many rushing touchdowns to help his fantasy value. But by all means, the reigning MVP is going to put himself back in that conversation this year and is going to have a very good year. I think him and Matthew Stafford, their numbers are going to look very similar, which is why I put them as 6 and 7 respectively.
Yeah, he's a defending MVP, and he's out to prove everybody wrong yet again in what appears to be Green Bay's last dance season. He's last year's QB3 fantasy-wise. Being able to pick him up in the later rounds when at a very solid value for the draft position. Right now, he's trending in round 556 overall. I have him as my number 5 overall quarterback on the board. We'll see how A-Rod does in this what appears to be the last season with Green Bay.
Yeah, you would imagine he's going to ball out this year just to make a point.
Yeah, I mean, he did last year. He was pissed off last year, and look what happened. Dude was an MVP.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving on. Number 8 on your board is Kyler Murray out of Arizona.
Yep, Kyler Murray, and a lot of it comes from his running ability. Which sounds weird. I dropped Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers because they don't have the rushing ability. Kyler Murray, his running ability helps him. It's the inconsistency that I mentioned earlier, talking about DeAndre Hopkins. That inconsistency in the passing game worries me a bit. That's what quarterbacks do. When it comes down to it, the quarterback has got to make plays from the pocket. So the ability, that being inconsistent worries me a bit. But Kylo Murray, he's got speed on his side. He's shifty when he takes off. So, that again gonna help his value. I had to put him in the top 10 because he's probably gonna end up with somewhere between 7 and 10 rushing touchdowns this year. Decent amount of rushing yards for people. But I wouldn't expect Kyler Murray to be a fantasy superstar this year.
I don't know, man. I have him as my number 3 overall quarterback. He's trending in the third round, 35th overall. I don't know if I would take him in the third. I definitely think you can get a hell of a lot more value, especially with somebody like Matt Stafford in the 10th round. But he had a solid season last year, even with his inconsistent play. Plus, he's in the second year of Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So I think he's definitely going to make improvements. I think he'll be a little bit more accurate. Plus, he has DeAndre Hopkins. They picked up James Conner to go with Chase Edmonds, both very good backs. So I think Kyler Murray is going to have a pretty decent season. Like I said, I have him as my third best quarterback. So a little bit of discrepancy there with you having him at number 8. But time will tell. Either way, I definitely think he'll still put up points for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so number 9. Who is number 9 on your board?
Number 9 is going to be Justin Herbert. Showed in his rookie year that he had all the tools to be a factor in both fantasy football and for his team in the NFL. And I think Justin Herbert, he's not somebody that takes off and runs all the time, but he's just athletic enough to be able to do it, kind of like a young Aaron Rodgers. He was never going to burn you with his runs, but he was shifty with when he decided to run and the space he was able to get. Justin Herbert has just enough rushing value to help him a little bit, but he has a cannon for an arm, and he has, again, Keenan Allen is there. We really like him. There's nothing we saw last year that said he shouldn't be in the top 10 here. He's destined to be a star in the NFL. So I wanted to put him as my number 9.
Yeah, I have him one spot ahead of you at number 8. He's trending in the 5th round, about the 60th pick. But the strength of schedule versus pass defense this year is projected to be the 6th toughest in the league. For that, I have him as number 8, but I do expect him to have another solid season this year. But like I said, with the 6th hardest schedule coming up, I just have to have him as my number 8 guy. I definitely think there's higher value you can get him with the guys above him, but he will have another good year, and he is a superstar in the making in Los Angeles. All right, number 10 for you. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, you like that? I this one I really wasn't sure who to go with. There were some guys I was debating about. Again, because so many of these guys fluctuate.
I just I just saw the little caption you got next to his name.
Yeah. So because I'm a Colts fan, I had to put Carson Wentz here, and like Zach just read, get this is my quarterback, and in our division debates when we were talking about Carson Wentz, I said that he will play like an MVP, but won't have the MVP kind of numbers because this is a run-heavy offense. But Carson Wentz is in a wonderful situation in Indy. He's shown that he can be an MVP caliber quarterback, which, when it comes to fantasy, translates well. And with the weapons I couldn't put any receivers for the Colts in my top 10 because this team and in this offense, Carson Wentz is going to be throwing to a lot of different people. And when you have that many options, it's hard to not have the numbers. Phillip Rivers, we saw Phillip Rivers toward the end of last half of last season. Phillip Rivers was fantasy relevant. He obviously doesn't have the running capability, but Carson Wentz, we're hoping, doesn't do a whole lot of running, but he does have that capability. If he has to, he can scramble out and get you some yards. Might even mess around and get a couple touchdowns this year running the ball. So, Carson Wentz, again, very biased pick. I'm more than fine with admitting that. I had to put my guy in the top 10. I had to put him there.
Yeah, so I have Carson as my number 20th quarterback coming off the board, and that's value to draft pick position ratio that I was trying to balance out there. But I do have Carson as a major sleeper for all the reasons you listed. I am a Colts fan, so I might be a little biased, but this offense is loaded with young, underrated talent. And Carson Wentz was in talks for MVP just a few seasons ago. And I know he's had injury issues, but the dude can still ball out. I just think last year in Philadelphia was a complete anomaly because that team was just so bad. So I can see Carson Wentz putting up the numbers to get up as a top 10 quarterback this year if he can stay healthy. But I have him as number 20 on my board. So I wouldn't necessarily reach for him, but if he's there towards the end of the draft, pick him up because he is going to do some good things this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned before, when you talk about, I would say, when you're talking about Justin Herbert, where I have him ranked, my number 9 quarterback and down, those are guys that I'm absolutely just trying to wait till, at least the ninth round on guys that, I'm going to go and get running backs and wide receivers and tight ends before I worry about getting these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's your top 10. There was one guy in my top 10 we left out, and that was Ryan Tannehill. He's my number 9 quarterback on the board. He's trending in the 8th round, 85th overall. They have the 13th easiest projected schedule against passing defenses. And he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league these last couple of years. But yet he's continued to produce every single year. And with the addition of Julio Jones, I think Tannehill will definitely be a fantasy starter this season, and he will serve you guys well. So, like I said, I have him number 9. Do you know where you have Tannehill? Do you have him listed anywhere?
He was one of the guys that I was seriously contemplating putting at number 10 right there behind Justin Herbert for the same reasons you just said. Just all the pieces are falling into place for him to be really good. And, people are talking about Jonnu Smith leaving. I watched Anthony Firsker a couple times when he had to play a couple games when Jonnu Smith was out, and he looked plenty good enough to be valuable for Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill liked throwing him the ball, so I don't think there's going to be a drop-off at any position. Obviously, Julio Jones is an upgrade from Corey Davis. So, by all means, Ryan Tannehill very easily could be a top 10. He probably should have been, but because of my bias, I put Carson there.
Yeah, and so an interesting little fact about Tannehill last season, his fantasy average was close to Lamar Jackson's last year, and his fantasy points on the season was actually higher. So if Tannehill's back there in the later rounds, he's definitely more than capable of picking up hell of a value for his draft position. So just keep note of that as you go through the draft. Remember these guys. To recap again, I'll run down mine. I'll let Jeffe run down his. I have Josh Allen number 1, Patrick Mahomes number 2, Kyler Murray number 3, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Ryan Tannehill, Matthew Stafford. At number 11, I have Tom Brady, followed by Joe Burrow, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, and Kirk Cousins. I was iffy putting him there, but with Thielen and Jefferson on that team, I think Cousins can definitely get some fantasy value there at number 15 overall.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all, especially having Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen is nice for Kirk. So my top 10, just to recap here, I also have Josh Allen at number 1, so we agree there. And then we start to differ. I have Lamar Jackson as number 2, Dak Prescott number 3, 4 is Russell Wilson, and Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers should all be right in that same area. And then finishing this out, we have Kyler Murray at 8, 9 is Justin Herbert, and Carson Wentz at number 10.